Sign the papers, Isabella. This marriage is over. Tonight.
Over? I gave up everything for you and now you throw me away like this?
That blizzard night, he placed divorce papers in front of me and said, "Sign it. Everything ends tonight." I stayed silent, one hand clutching my stomach, hiding the biggest secret of my life. He left me for $1 billion deal. But 10 years later, we met again under the dazzling lights of a gala. And this time, everything had changed. My name is Isabella Hartman. Before I share the whole story, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rise after betrayal. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The snow fell like broken promises that night in Aspen, each flake another lie I'd believed for 3 years. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of our mountain estate, watching the world turn white while candlelight flickered behind me on the dining table I'd set for 2. 3 years. 3 years since Alexander Cole had slipped that diamond onto my finger and whispered that I was his universe. 3 years of charity galas where I smiled beside him, of board dinners where I charmed investors, of lonely nights when Cole dynamics demanded another piece of his soul. My hand drifted to my stomach, still flat, still keeping it secret. The pregnancy test hidden in my jewelry box had shown 2 pink lines this morning. I'd driven to 3 different pharmacies, bought 3 different brands, all positive, all pointing to a future I'd painted in my mind throughout the day. Alexander's face when I told him, his hands on my belly, choosing names over morning coffee. The front door opened with its familiar beep. I smoothed my black dress, the one he'd bought me in Paris, and turned toward the foyer. "Alexander?" I called, my voice carrying hope like a fragile glass ornament. He appeared in the doorway, snow still dusting his charcoal coat. But instead of the tired smile I expected, his face wore the same expression he used for hostile takeovers. Cold, calculating, already 3 moves ahead. "We need to talk," he said, setting his briefcase on the marble counter with a decisive click. "I made dinner," I offered, gesturing to the carefully plated salmon growing cold. "And I have news." "Isabella." The way he said my name made me stop mid-sentence, like punctuation at the end of a contract clause. He pulled a manila folder from his briefcase, thick with legal documents. "This needs to happen tonight." The folder landed on the dining table next to the untouched wine glasses. Divorce papers. My name typed in harsh black letters across the top. "I don't understand." The words came out strangled, foreign in my mouth. Alexander removed his coat with practiced precision, hanging it in the closet like any other Tuesday. "The board meeting is next week. We're taking Cole Dynamics public. The IPO will value the company at $2.8 billion. "What does that have to do with everything?" He loosened his tie, a habit I once found endearing. "The investment analysts have done their due diligence. Every aspect of the company has been scrutinized, including me, including my life, including you." I sank into the dining chair, my legs suddenly unable to support the weight of understanding. "You're divorcing me for a stock price?" "Don't be dramatic." He poured himself scotch from the decanter, not offering me any. He knew I'd stopped drinking. He just didn't know why. "This is business. The board needs a CEO with an impeccable image. Your background doesn't fit the narrative." "My background?" Heat rose in my chest. "You mean because I grew up middle class? Because my father was a teacher instead of a hedge fund manager?" "Among other things." He took a measured sip. "My mother agrees it's for the best." Margaret. Of course. The woman who'd spent 3 years reminding me that her son had married beneath his station. "Is this her idea?" I grabbed the papers, scanning the terms. Standard dissolution. No alimony requested. Clean break, like I was an employee being terminated with a standard severance package. "It's the right move." Alexander checked his phone, already moving on to the next item on his agenda. "You'll keep the Portland condo. The papers need to be signed tonight. The lawyers are expecting them by morning." I stood, my hand instinctively protecting my stomach. The words, "I'm pregnant," burned on my tongue, begging to be released. They could change everything. Or nothing. Looking at his impassive face, I realized I didn't want to find out. "It's not personal," he added, as if that made it better. "It's business." I signed where indicated, my signature barely recognizable through the tremor in my hand. Each page felt like signing away a piece of my soul. When I finished, I set the pen down carefully, afraid I might snap it in half. "I'll be gone by morning," I said. He nodded, already texting someone. Probably his lawyer, or his mother, or the board member who'd suggested his wife was a liability to be managed. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, his bedroom now, and packed the essentials. My mother's jewelry, the photos from before we met. The pregnancy test stayed hidden, a secret I'd take with me into the Colorado storm. As I loaded my car, Alexander called from the doorway, "Isabella." I turned, hope fluttering stupidly in my chest. "Drive carefully. The roads are icy." He closed the door before I could respond. I sat in my car, watching our house, his house, disappear in the rearview mirror as I drove into the blizzard, carrying the only piece of Alexander Cole he'd never know existed. Portland welcomed me back with rain, as if the city itself was mourning my return. My old apartment smelled like mildew and broken dreams, a one-bedroom in Jade District that I'd kept just in case. Funny how we prepare for disasters we refuse to believe will happen. I sat on the threadbare couch, my designer suitcase looking absurd against the water-stained carpet, and opened my laptop. Bank account, $3,000. Credit cards, maxed from furnishing the Aspen house, from being Mrs. Cole who didn't need to check prices, from believing in forever. The phone buzzed. Alexander's lawyer. The divorce would be finalized in 30 days. Uncontested meant fast, efficient, like removing a tumor before it could metastasize. I threw up for the first time that night, though whether from morning sickness or heartbreak, I couldn't tell. Kneeling on the cracked bathroom tile, I made my first decision as a single mother. I would not beg. I would not ask for alimony. I would not give him or his mother the satisfaction of calling me a gold digger at their cocktail parties. "You hear that?" I whispered to my belly. "We're going to do this on our own." The weeks blurred together in a haze of job applications and rejection emails. My art history degree from a state school didn't impress anyone. My 3-year gap in employment as wife wasn't considered relevant experience. Olivia found me on week 6, showing up at my door with Thai food and a bottle of wine I couldn't drink. "Jesus, Bella," she said, surveying my apartment. "Why didn't you call me?" "Pride," I admitted, accepting the pad thai gratefully. I'd been living on ramen and prenatal vitamins. She stayed until I told her everything. Almost everything. The pregnancy remained my secret, growing quietly while my world shrank. By month 4, I couldn't hide anymore. The coffee shop where I'd found work as a barista had to let me go. Too much liability, they said. The evening art classes I taught at the community center paid pennies. I sold my designer clothes on consignment apps, watching pieces of my former life disappear for fractions of their worth. The contractions started at 32 weeks, too early, too fast. I drove myself to the county hospital, the one that wouldn't ask for insurance cards up front. Olivia met me there, holding my hand while I screamed through pain that made divorce papers seem like paper cuts. "Twins," the ultrasound tech had said at my one prenatal appointment I could afford. "Congratulations." Now, 18 hours later, they arrived like warriors. Clara first, screaming her displeasure at the bright world. Then Sophie, quiet but fierce, gripping my finger like she'd never let go. The hospital room's TV droned in the background. I was adjusting Clara's hospital bracelet when the news anchor's voice cut through my exhaustion. Tech mogul Alexander Cole celebrates as Cole Dynamics goes public, with an initial valuation exceeding $5 billion. There he was, ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, his smile worth more than my daughter's birth certificates. Margaret stood beside him, her pearl necklace catching the camera lights. "Turn it off," Olivia said sharply, but I shook my head. "No." I needed to see, needed to remember. "Let it play." The segment continued. Alexander's prepared statement about innovation and growth. B-roll of the Aspen house where I'd signed my life away. No mention of the wife he'd shed like an outdated operating system. Sophie stirred in my arms, her tiny face scrunching. Clara had already claimed my breast, feeding with the same determination she'd shown arriving in the world. I looked down at them, my daughters, my universe, and felt something calcify in my chest. Not hate. Something harder. Resolve. We're going to be okay, I told them, meaning it for the first time. You're going to have everything I can give you. Everything except him. The nurse came with discharge papers. No insurance meant leaving within 24 hours. Olivia had brought car seats, second-hand but safe. I signed my name, steadier now than on divorce papers. In the hospital parking lot, rain pelting the asphalt, I buckled my daughters into Olivia's Honda. 2 tiny lives depending on me. No safety net, no backup plan, no Alexander Cole to solve problems with a phone call. You sure you don't want to file for child support? Olivia asked gently. He should know. They're his. No. I closed Clara's car seat with a decisive click. He made his choice. I'm making mine. We don't need anything from someone who could throw us away for a stock price. The rain intensified as we drove home, but for the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. I was swimming, one stroke at a time, carrying 2 hearts beside my own. The coffee, burns on my hands, told time better than any clock. 3 years of pulling doubles at Stumptown Coffee, teaching art to disinterested teenagers, and painting portraits for tourists at Saturday Market. 3 years of formula math. 1 can equals 3 days if I stretched it. 3 years of choosing between electricity and groceries, always choosing what the girls needed first. Clara learned to walk in the kitchen of our studio apartment, her first steps toward the refrigerator that hummed and died in alternating weeks. Sophie spoke her first word, Mama, while I mixed cereal with water because we'd run out of milk. They grew beautiful and brilliant on love and determination, unaware that other children had bedrooms instead of corners, new clothes instead of Goodwill finds. Mommy's tired, became my refrain, but never too tired for bedtime stories. I painted their dreams on thrift store canvases, creating worlds where dragons were friendly and princesses saved themselves, where mothers never cried in bathroom stalls during lunch breaks. The eviction notice arrived on their 4th birthday. 60 days to vacate. The landlord needed to renovate, raise the rent for Portland's booming tech workers. People like Alexander, I thought bitterly, then pushed his name back into the locked box in my mind where it belonged. We lived in my car for 2 weeks. A 1998 Honda Civic with 200,000 miles and a heater that worked when it felt like it. I'd park at different Walmart lots, tucking the girls into sleeping bags in the back seat, telling them we were camping. Clara, ever logical, asked why we couldn't camp at home. Sophie just held my hand, as if she understood more than any 4-year-old should. The morning that changed everything started like any other. I was setting up my paintings at Pioneer Courthouse Square, the girls coloring beside me with broken crayons, when a woman in expensive shoes stopped. These are extraordinary, she said, studying my landscape series. Portland bridges in various lights, painted during the hours I should have been sleeping. Thank you. I straightened, trying not to look desperate. They're $50 to each, or $200 for the set. And she bought all 12 paintings, cash, then handed me a business card. I own a gallery in the Pearl District. I'd like to see more of your work. Elena Volkov became my first break. Not charity, she made that clear. Business. My pain had translated into something people wanted to buy. Dark, moody pieces that captured the beauty in struggling, the light that only shows up when you're at the bottom looking up. The first gallery show sold out. Small pieces priced for regular people, but it was enough for a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment. Enough for Clara and Sophie to have their own beds. Enough to breathe. Daniel Walsh walked into my life at a fundraiser for arts education, one I was painting live portraits at for exposure more than pay. He bid $500 on my sketch of his daughter's school. That's too much, I protested. Art education matters, he said simply. My wife believed that. Believed. Past tense. I recognized the grief in his eyes, the way he held himself like he was still leaving room for someone who wasn't there anymore. We talked about loss without naming it, about raising children alone, about how mac and cheese from a box could taste like love when you made it together. He ran a charter school that believed every child deserved excellence, regardless of zip code. I told him about Clara's obsession with chemistry sets made from kitchen ingredients, Sophie's ability to see colors I couldn't name. Bring them to visit, he offered. "We have an after-school program." I almost said no. Pride had become my armor. But Clara had been asking about real school, and Sophie needed more than the art supplies I scrounged from dollar stores. Watching them bloom in Daniel's school felt like watching flowers find sun after years in shade. Clara discovered actual microscopes. Sophie learned that art could be rebellion, expression, voice. Daniel and I discovered each other slowly, carefully, like diffusing bombs we'd both carried too long. "I'm not looking for anything," I told him over coffee one evening, the girls at Olivia's for a sleepover. "Neither am I," he admitted. "But sometimes not looking is when you find what you need." He never pushed, never asked about their father. When Clara asked why they didn't have a dad like other kids, Daniel was the one who said, "Families come in all shapes. Yours is exactly the right size." By year 5, Hartman Galleries had expanded to 3 locations. Not an empire yet, but a foundation. Strong enough to build on. Strong enough to catch us if we fell. The night I signed the lease for the Seattle space, I found Alexander's name in Forbes. Still climbing, still conquering, still irrelevant to the life we'd built from ashes. "We did it," I whispered to my daughters as they slept, sprawled across their own beds in their own rooms. "We actually did it." The spotlight caught the chandeliers at the Seattle Art Museum, fracturing light across 500 faces turned toward the stage. I stood at the podium, no longer the desperate woman who'd once mixed cereal with water, and surveyed my kingdom built from survival. "Art saved my life," I began, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned every word. Not metaphorically, literally. When you have nothing left but the ability to create, you discover that's everything. The audience, collectors, critics, and socialites who now knew my name, applauded. Clara and Sophie sat in the front row, 16 and radiant. Clara wore the periodic table earrings I'd commissioned for her early MIT acceptance. Sophie had paint under her fingernails despite the formal dress, a Harvard recruitment letter folded in her clutch. Tonight, Hartman Galleries celebrates not just 10 years of business, but 10 years of proving that beauty can bloom anywhere, even in concrete cracks, even in... The ballroom doors opened. Late arrivals were common at these events, but something about the purposeful stride made me pause. Then I saw him. Alexander Cole entered like he owned the museum. The same measured walk, the same calculated presence. 10 years had silvered his temples but sharpened his edges. He took a seat at a sponsor table, his eyes never leaving my face. I forced my voice steady. Even in the darkest storms. The speech continued on autopilot. Thank the sponsors. Acknowledge the artists. Announce the scholarship program. All while Alexander's presence pressed against my consciousness like a bruise I'd forgotten could still hurt. Daniel found me during the reception, his hand warm on my back. "You okay? You went pale during the speech." "Alexander's here," I said quietly. Daniel's eyes found him instantly, a principal's talent for spotting trouble. "Want me to have security?" "No." I straightened my shoulders. "This is my world now. He's just a visitor." But Alexander navigated toward us with inevitable precision, waiting until Daniel stepped away to check on the silent auction before approaching. "Isabella," still saying my name like punctuation. "You look successful?" I supplied. Sipping champagne I no longer had to ration. "Different," he finished. "The speech was impressive. So was your IPO." I kept my voice neutral, professional. "Congratulations on your billions." Something flickered across his face. Regret? Curiosity? "I heard about your galleries. Mother clips the articles." "How thorough of her." I spotted Clara explaining molecular structures to a bewildered donor, Sophie charming the museum director. "If you'll excuse me." "The girls," he said suddenly. "In the front row. They're yours?" My blood chilled. "My daughters, yes. They're remarkable." The blonde one, Clara? She was discussing RNA sequencing with Professor Martinez. And the other, Sophie. Her understanding of color theory. He paused, calculating. "They must be about 16? "I should check on the auction." I moved to leave, but his hand caught my elbow. The first time he'd touched me in a decade. "Isabella, They're mine," I said firmly, pulling free. "Just mine." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw the familiar pattern. Important call. Big deal. The world needing Alexander Cole more than Alexander Cole needed any individual person in it. "I should take this," he said, already shifting focus. "Perhaps we could have coffee. Catch up properly." "I don't think that's necessary." "A business discussion, then. I'm interested in acquiring some pieces for the new Coal Industries headquarters." Of course. Everything was business with him. I pulled out my gallery card, the same professional smile I gave any potential client. "Have your assistant call mine. We'll arrange a viewing." He pocketed the card, already lifting his phone. "It was good to see you, Isabella." I watched him walk away, taking another call that mattered more than ghosts at galas. Clara appeared at my side, linking her arm through mine. "Who is that?" she asked, too perceptive as always. "Just a potential client," I said, kissing her forehead. "No one important." Sophie joined us, paint definitely on her dress now. "Mom, the museum director wants to discuss a young artist showcase. Can we—" "Of course." I gathered my girls close, my universe intact. "Let's go change the art world." As we walked away, I felt Alexander's eyes on us. Let him look. Let him see what he'd traded for stock options and board approval. But when I glanced back, he was gone, lost in the crowd of people who measured worth in dollars instead of heartbeats. "You're smiling," Daniel noted when we reconvened, his hand finding mine. "Just remembering how far we've come," I said, meaning it. The gala swirled on, but I was already home, surrounded by the family I'd chosen and the life I'd built. Alexander Cole might own half of Seattle's skyline, but I owned something more valuable: the knowledge that some kingdoms are worth more than others. The call came at 3 a.m., 2 weeks after the gala. My lawyer, Olivia, sounded wide awake despite the hour. "Isabella, we have a problem. Someone's been digging into your past. Professional job, courthouse records, hospital files, even school enrollments." I sat up, instantly alert. "Alexander?" "Most likely. The investigator used shell companies, but the trail leads back to Coal Industries' security firm." She paused. "Bella, they pulled the girls' birth certificates." My chest tightened. Of course. Alexander Cole didn't just notice things. He acquired information like stocks, hoarding data, until he could make the right move. "What do we do?" "For now, nothing. Hiring investigators isn't illegal, but document everything. And maybe it's time to tell the girls." After we hung up, I found Clara in the kitchen, building a model for her science fair at 3:30 a.m., my little insomniac, so driven she forgot sleep was necessary. "Couldn't sleep either?" I poured myself tea with shaking hands. "Molecular structures are more cooperative at night," she said, then looked up sharply. "Mom, you're worried. Your tell is showing. You're stirring counterclockwise." I smiled despite everything. My brilliant, observant daughter. "Just work stuff." "Is it about that man from the gala? The one who watched us all night?" I nearly dropped my mug. "You noticed?" Sophie and I both did. She said he looked at us like we were paintings he was trying to understand. Clara adjusted her safety goggles, a gesture so endearingly her. "Who is he really?" The truth sat heavy on my tongue. Not yet. Not at 3 a.m. over molecular models. "Someone from my past," I said finally. "Before you were born." Clara nodded slowly, then returned to her project. But I caught her glancing at me, questions building behind those analytical eyes. The week unraveled in slow motion. Alexander's assistant called about viewing artwork 3 times. I delegated to my gallery manager. Then Margaret Cole herself appeared at the Seattle location, ostensibly shopping but radiating ulterior motives. "Isabella," she said, studying a painting of Portland bridges, "you've done well for yourself." "Mrs. Cole." I kept my distance, professional smile fixed. "Can I help you find something specific?" She turned, and I saw Alexander in her sharp assessment. "Actually, yes. I'm looking for discretion." "I'm afraid that's not for sale." Her smile was winter cold. "Everything has a price. Say, $10 million? I laughed, surprising us both. Is that what silence costs these days? "Don't be crude." She pulled out a check, already signed. "This is a business proposal. You maintain your current discretion about certain matters, and this ensures your daughter's education is fully funded." "My daughter's education is already funded. By me. MIT and Harvard are expensive, even with scholarships." She set the check on the counter. Consider their futures. I am. I tore the check in half, then quarters. Their futures don't include blood money from people who thought they were too inconvenient to exist. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. You always were too emotional for Alexander's world. No, I corrected. I was too human. She left without another word, but the threat lingered like perfume. They knew. They all knew. That evening, I found Sophie in her studio space, working on a piece that made my breath catch. Two girls, backs to the viewer, facing a shattered mirror that reflected different versions of themselves. It's about identity, she explained, adding another brushstroke. How we see ourselves versus how others see us, and the parts we hide. It's powerful, I managed, throat tight. Mom? She set down her brush. Clara and I have been talking about the man from the gala, about why we don't have baby pictures from before age 1, about why you never talk about our father. The moment I'd dreaded for 16 years had arrived. We're not stupid, Sophie continued gently. We've done the math, the timeline, the way you change the subject, the way Daniel looks at us sometimes, like he's protecting us from something we don't understand. Sophie, we know he's our father, the man from the gala, Alexander Cole. She picked up her brush again, adding shadows to the painting. We figured it out months ago. We've just been waiting for you to be ready to tell us. I sank onto her art stool, years of careful protection crumbling. How are you so calm about this? Because, Clara said from the doorway, joining her sister, we know the only parent who matters is the one who stayed. They sandwiched me in a hug, my brilliant, perceptive daughters who'd inherited their father's intelligence but their mother's heart. We have questions, Clara admitted. A lot of questions. I know, I whispered into their hair. I'll tell you everything. Just not tonight. Tonight, let me just hold you. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and difficult conversations. But tonight, in Sophie's art studio, surrounded by portraits of the life we'd built, we were still just us. Still whole, still ours. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, splashed across the Seattle Times business section. Cole Industries CEO's secret family drama, twin daughters discovered after decade of silence. My phone exploded before I'd finished my coffee. Reporters, clients, friends who'd never suspected. The carefully constructed privacy I'd built around my daughters evaporated in newsprint and speculation. Mom, there are photographers outside, Clara said calmly, peering through the blinds. Should I call the school? I'll handle it. But my hands shook as I dialed Daniel. He arrived within minutes, ushering us out through the garage, his principal authority creating a buffer against the chaos. At school, he stationed security at every entrance. This is what he does, I told Daniel in his office, pacing like a caged animal. Controls the narrative, makes himself the victim. Then we change the narrative, Olivia said, entering with a stack of papers. But first, you need to see this. The leaked emails made my stomach turn. Internal Cole Industries communications, Margaret telling Alexander to handle the liability before IPO, another calling me disposable. The coup de grace, Alexander himself writing, she's served her purpose, time for an upgrade. How did reporters get these? Olivia smiled sharply. Let's say I've been preparing for this day for 16 years. Every document, every communication during your divorce. I kept copies. When they started digging into your life, I decided to return the favor. You leaked them? Prove it, she said, pure lawyer. But yes, he fired first. This is return fire. Alexander appeared at the gallery that afternoon, pushing past my manager with typical entitlement. I met him in my office, Olivia flanking me like a guardian angel with a law degree. Call off your dog, he demanded, slamming the morning paper on my desk. I don't have a dog, I replied evenly. Though I remember you comparing me to one in those emails. What was it? Loyal but expendable when the breed becomes inconvenient? His jaw tightened. Those were taken out of context. Which context makes abandoning your pregnant wife better, business or personal? I didn't know you were pregnant. Because you didn't stay long enough to find out. I stood, matching his stance. You had your chance, Alexander. You chose your kingdom of glass over flesh and blood. They're my daughters, too. Biologically, I conceded, but fathers are made through presence, not DNA. Where were you for Clara's first science fair? Sophie's art shows? The nights they were sick, the mornings they were scared? The 16 years of being their everything? I want to meet them properly, get to know them. What you want stopped mattering the night you handed me divorce papers like a severance package. His control finally cracked. I'll sue for paternity rights, visitation, partial custody. Try it, Olivia interjected, spreading documents across my desk. Clause 47B of your divorce agreement. You waived all rights to future children in exchange for Isabella not seeking alimony. Your signature, notarized. Alexander went pale, grabbing the papers. I didn't read. Too busy with your IPO, I finished, just like always. He sank into a chair, the corporate titan suddenly looking lost. For a moment, I saw the man I'd married, before ambition calcified his heart. I've made mistakes, he said quietly. No, I corrected. You made choices. Now live with them. The door burst open. Sophie stood there, flushed and fierce. Mom, Clara found something. You need to see the news. We crowded around my computer, watching Coal Industries' stock plummet in real time. The leaked emails had triggered a shareholder revolt. Board members were calling for Alexander's resignation. Margaret Cole was being investigated for financial irregularities. The sins of the father, Clara murmured, watching numbers fall like dominoes. I didn't want this, I said, meaning it. I just wanted to be left alone. Alexander stood slowly, defeat aging him 10 years. You win, Isabella. This was never a game to me, I replied. That's the difference between us. He paused at the door, looking back at my daughters, our daughters, who stood protectively beside me. They're remarkable. You did that without me, despite me. We did it ourselves, Sophie said, chin raised. All three of us. He nodded once and left. Through my window, I watched him climb into his Bentley, phone already at his ear, fighting to save what remained of his empire. Are you okay? Clara asked, taking my hand. Are you? I countered. My daughters exchanged glances, communicating in their secret twin language. We're good, Sophie decided. But next time someone tries to ambush our family, maybe give us a heads up. We've got ideas. I hugged them tightly, my brilliant warriors. The storm would pass. The reporters would find new scandals, but we'd weather it together, like always. Pizza tonight? I suggested. With extra cheese, Clara agreed. Carbs help process emotional trauma. Even in chaos, we found our rhythm. The family we'd chosen over the one genetics tried to force. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. 6 months after the media explosion, we sat in family court, the final battlefield Alexander had chosen. Despite the mounting pressure from his board, despite his empire crumbling, he'd pushed forward with his paternity suit. Clara and Sophie flanked me, 16-year-old warriors in their best clothes. They'd insisted on coming, on seeing the man who'd haunted our shadows face his reckoning. All rise for Judge Patricia Chen, the bailiff announced. What followed was theater of the absurd. Alexander's lawyers painted him as a victim. A father denied his rights, discovering too late what he'd lost. They spoke of redemption, of second chances, of biological imperatives. Olivia demolished them methodically. Your Honor, she began, we don't dispute biological paternity. We dispute the definition of fatherhood itself. Is it DNA or daily presence? Is it financial capability or emotional availability? Is it about rights or about responsibility? She presented 16 years of evidence. Every birthday Alexander missed. Every milestone he'd never known to celebrate. Every night I'd worked 3 jobs while he collected bonuses worth more than small nations. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. I'd like to call Daniel Walsh to the stand, Olivia announced. Daniel took the oath with steady hands, his presence calming even from across the room. Under questioning, he detailed his role in our lives, not as replacement father, but as chosen family. The school events attended, the science fairs judged, the quiet presence when presence mattered most. Mr. Walsh, Alexander's lawyer sneered, isn't it true you're romantically involved with Miss Hartman, that you stand to gain from keeping Mr. Cole away from his children? Daniel's voice never wavered. I gain nothing from loving Isabella and her daughters except the privilege of loving them. That's something Mr. Cole never understood. Family isn't an acquisition. It's a choice you make every single day. The coup de grace came when Olivia presented the smoking gun, documents from Alexander's own divorce lawyer, including the sealed clause he'd signed waiving parental rights. This wasn't buried in fine print, Olivia emphasized. This was separately negotiated. Mr. Cole received a substantial tax benefit for waiving future heir claims. He literally sold his parental rights for a better quarterly report. Alexander's lawyers scrambled, but the damage was done. Then Olivia played her final card. Your Honor, we have one more piece of evidence. An email chain from Margaret Cole to her son, dated 1 week before the divorce filing. She read aloud, "Get rid of her before the IPO. She's a liability. If she's pregnant, it's cheaper to pay now than risk a scandal later. Make sure the waiver is ironclad. No loose ends." The courtroom went silent. Alexander stared at his mother, who sat rigid in the gallery, her pearl necklace like a chain around her neck. "You knew," his voice cracked across the space. "Mother, you knew she might be pregnant?" Margaret's silence was admission enough. Judge Chen called a recess, but the verdict was already written in Alexander's slumped shoulders. His own mother had orchestrated the removal of his children from his life before they were even confirmed to exist. When we reconvened, Judge Chen's ruling was swift and decisive. "Mr. Cole, you made a choice 16 years ago to prioritize your business over your family. You signed away rights to children you didn't bother to confirm existed. You cannot now claim those rights simply because your priorities have shifted," she continued. "Fatherhood is not a stock option you can exercise when market conditions favor it. Petition denied. The existing custody arrangement stands." Alexander stood slowly, his empire in ruins, his relationship with his mother shattered, his daughters forever out of reach. He looked at Clara and Sophie, opened his mouth, closed it. "Your Honor," he said finally, "might I have 1 minute to speak to them? Not as a father, just as someone who should apologize." Judge Chen looked to me. I nodded. Alexander approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Clara, Sophie, I'm sorry. Not for wanting to know you now, but for not fighting to know you then. Your mother gave you something I never could have. The certainty that you were chosen, every day, in every decision. That's worth more than any trust fund." Sophie spoke for both of them. "We know who our family is, Mr. Cole, but thank you for finally seeing it too." As we left the courthouse, snow began to fall. Gentler than that night in Aspen, but still marking an ending. Alexander stood on the courthouse steps, watching us pile into Daniel's car, a man finally understanding the difference between price and value. "You okay?" Daniel asked, pulling into traffic. I looked back at my daughters, already debating where to get lunch, resilient and remarkable. "We're perfect," I said, meaning it completely. The gallery smelled like roses and new beginnings. 5 years had passed since the courthouse steps, and today, beneath installations Sophie had created specifically for the occasion, I married Daniel Walsh in a ceremony that was perfectly us. Intimate, authentic, surrounded by art and chosen family. Clara, now 21 and deep in her MIT doctorate, stood as my maid of honor, explaining to anyone who'd listen how the molecular structure of happy tears differed from sad ones. Sophie, Harvard's newest art history graduate, had transformed the space into something magical. Light installations that painted love stories on the walls. "You ready for this?" Olivia asked, adjusting my simple silk dress. "I've been ready since he showed up at that school fundraiser," I admitted. The ceremony was brief. Our vows simple. Daniel promised to continue choosing us daily. I promised to stop apologizing for taking up space in my own life. Clara and Sophie served as witnesses, signing their names with flourishes that made me laugh. As the reception wound down, Sophie handed me an envelope. "This came to the gallery yesterday. I thought, maybe today you'd want to see it." Alexander's handwriting, still precise after all these years. Inside, a single page. "Isabella, I heard about your wedding through the inevitable Seattle grapevine. I wanted to offer congratulations, though I suspect they're unnecessary. You've never needed anyone's approval to build your happiness. Coal Industries went bankrupt last year. Poetic justice, perhaps, though I find myself oddly freed by the loss. My mother and I no longer speak. Another freedom, overdue. I teach now. Business ethics, if you can believe the irony. I tell my students about a man who had everything and traded it for numbers on a screen. They think it's a cautionary tale about corporate greed. They're only partially right. Next month, Clara and Sophie graduate. I won't be there. That privilege belongs to those who earned it. But I've endowed scholarships in their names at both schools. Anonymous, of course. Not for redemption, just because. I sometimes walk past your galleries. You built something real while I built sandcastles. The girl I met at that college party, the one who painted dreams on napkins, she became everything she imagined, despite me. Because of my absence, perhaps. I loved you once, in my broken way. Not enough to choose you over myself, but enough to be grateful you chose yourself over me. Live well, Isabella. You always have. Alexander. I folded the letter carefully, then handed it to Sophie. File it under ancient history. You're not angry? Clara asked, reading over her sister's shoulder. Anger takes energy better spent on joy, I said, watching Daniel dance with his daughter from his first marriage, my stepdaughter now. He's finally understanding what we've always known. Families aren't built on DNA or documents. They're built on showing up. The evening faded into night, guests departing with paintings Sophie had created as favors. Daniel and I swayed to jazz in our empty gallery, surrounded by art born from pain transformed into beauty. Any regrets? He asked, spinning me gently. None that matter, I said, meaning it. You? Just one, he admitted. I wish I'd found you sooner. You found me exactly when we were ready, I corrected. That's the thing about time. It's not about duration. It's about depth. Later, in our quiet home, I stood before my bathroom mirror removing jewelry, removing the day's joy to save in memory. The woman looking back bore scars, invisible but essential. She'd been broken and rebuilt, abandoned and self-recovered, emptied and refilled with purpose. Through the window, Seattle glittered like possibilities. Somewhere in that maze of lights, Alexander Cole was learning to live with consequences. Margaret was alone with her pearls and prejudices. But here, in this house filled with teenage laughter and patient love, we'd built something stock markets couldn't value. Coming to bed? Daniel called. In a minute, I promised, taking one last look at my reflection. The girl who'd set a table for two in Aspen was gone. The woman who'd signed divorce papers with shaking hands had evolved. The mother who'd mixed cereal with water had transformed into someone who owned galleries and hearts with equal grace. But they were all still me. All necessary steps on the path from that snowy night to this quiet triumph. I turned off the light and went to join my husband, my daughter's voices carrying from their rooms. Clara on the phone with her boyfriend, Sophie planning her next exhibition. The sound of family. The sound of choices made correctly, even when they'd been brutal. Love wasn't just patient and kind. Sometimes love was walking away. Sometimes love was building empires from ashes. Sometimes love was choosing yourself first so you could choose others better. And sometimes love was simply this: turning off lights in a house you'd earned, walking toward a future you'd written, carrying the knowledge that every scar had been worth its lesson. The snow fell gently outside. Nothing like Aspen's blizzard. This snow whispered of peace, of stories ending where they should, not with forgiveness or revenge, but with lives fully lived despite the people who'd tried to make them smaller.
Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about walking away when staying means losing yourself. Never let someone measure your worth in numbers or status. Build your own life, your own strength, and remember this: the people who truly matter will never make you beg to be chosen.